Are you against work from home?
I'm not a big fan.
But a lot of companies saw during COVID, oh, this can work.
We did it as well. To be honest with you, it was quite successful. But you had an environment of pressure, of survival, an environment of we all want to keep our jobs, an environment of we all need to stay afloat here. So there was, whether you like it, I wouldn't say trust. There was a certain desperation to stay afloat and desperation to work.
Because we would see, like the airline industry, we saw a lot of people losing their jobs.
And I guarantee you, COVID for you and I will forever be one of the most intense work experience we've had in our lives. Right? To me, it is for sure. To me, that the COVID times, and I was CEO of Virtugroup at the time, cut salaries by 50%. The whole thing, we had to react very quickly. The lockdown, working from home, working the phones, putting in systems. I mean, it shows you why the human race is still undefeated.
Right. Why the hesitancy to sort of be a fan of working from home now?
Because you can trust people. I don't think that everybody will be honest in their work. It's not in a spirit of, oh, I'm paying you and you're not working.
Right.
It's in a spirit of, I need to get the work done.
If you're walking around the office and you might be able to identify who's working and who's not.
Yes, but there's an environment in the office that pushes you to work. There's this sort of phenomenon of crowd that's like, look, the guy next to me is working, so I need to be working, even if I'm flirting a bit with my phone or whatever it is. But I got to get back to my desk. I got to get some work done. Nothing stops you at work, at home, to just do nothing for the whole day and just maybe work for a couple hours, send a couple of emails, and the productivity must go down.
George, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
So good to be here, man. I haven't seen you in ages now.
Yeah, it's been... So you helped me get the job at Arabian Business.
Oof, that was many years ago.
I started January 2017.
Oh, wow.
Right.
7-8 years ago.
And then there's a theme on the show where I'm quite honest about getting fired from places. And then I'm not sure publicly if we say I got fired or
I think
it
was a mutual agreement, if I remember correctly.
So, well, there was somebody we worked with who went and told a certain wire service that I had been fired.
That's
and
possible.
Then I think there was a retraction.
Okay. I'm not sure. I don't remember this.
So there was, I think to say mutually, there was a decision to leave. That both parties agreed on. And it was an awkward moment because we were all going through this. From an editorial point of view, we were going through this awkward time where the blockade had just started. Do you remember the circumstances?
Yes, I remember that.
The blockade had just started, and one of the reporters...
It was very sensitive at the time, yeah.
One of the reporters had posted a story that a TV station in Doha had used to criticize Dubai. And then if you remember...
I remember something like that.
Arabian Business couldn't publish for a month.
Yes, I remember that.
The website was blocked.
I remember that, yeah.
The reporter was fired. I was told that it's probably best if I resigned, which I did. And then, so that was mid-2017, and I haven't seen you since.
I don't believe we have.
No?
I don't believe we have. I mean, today with social media, I see all the stuff that you're doing.
Sure.
Well done, by the way. Great
Thank
stuff.
you.
I really like what you're doing. I saw that you had a stint with the National as well. Sorry, not with the National, with the Khaleej Times recently.
Got fired from there too.
Well, it's okay. It's just, it's your modus operandi. You just tell people that. That's all you have to do.
So...
For the listeners, by the way, I do love your style. I was just telling you this before the podcast.
Thank you.
You do tend to be, to create a bit of friction, but I love the fact that you have an editorial integrity and that you're always, you always believe in what you think.
That actually brings up an interesting point because...
But you are flexible and you are diplomatic, I got to say.
Yes.
I told you that before
yes,
as well.
100%. Yeah. But this brings up an interesting point, and we haven't talked about it, but I want to discuss it actually, which is what happened behind the scenes at AB? We don't have to name names of people.
But at AB?
Yes, but there were issues with somebody who had my job before I did, who was in a different role. And there was some drama that was going on before I left.
To be honest with you, completely honest, I don't remember. I don't remember. I would, you love me, you know me. I love to gossip, but I don't remember. I don't remember any of that, or I would actually talk about it.
Sure.
But I don't. I mean, look, I had 7 years or 8 years, I think, at ITP in Arabian Business. I had a great time. I loved my time there. It's a great title. Got to meet a lot of people.
Right.
went through a few editors, as you might have noticed. So and in journalism and in the business scene and day-to-day news, there's so much stuff happening, right? There's so much stuff that happens every day. There's drama. There's all kinds of things. So I don't remember these stories, to be honest, on what happened here or there. Now that you reminded me about the blockade thing and all that, I had completely forgot about this story.
Maybe you blocked it out.
Maybe.
So I left mid 2017. When did you leave?
I left in April or in March 2018, so not long after.
And from there, you went directly to Virtuzone?
So I went to Virtuzone. So Virtuzone was founded by two friends of mine, so Neil Petch and Jeff Rapp, and they founded it in 2009. And we've been friends for over 20 years now.
Right.
And the guys were asking me to come join them for a long time while I was at ITP.
Let me stop you there just for a sec. Virtuzone, tell for listeners who don't know.
Yeah.
Virtuzone
so Virtuzone is the biggest corporate service provider in the Middle East. Basically, at the start, it was about company formation, so you could set up your company. And the guys had partnered up with Fujairah to be able to sell Fujairah licenses in Dubai. That was a novelty, and that was an innovation, right? And the office, for those who know, who've been in Dubai for a long time, the office was in JBR at the time. And slowly it developed. So obviously it started having copycats, right? So people were like, hey, this is a good business model. It had a few copycats. And then today there's over 3,200 corporate service providers in the UAE, really? Imagine. So that's what it is. It started off as that. Now it's a full-fledged corporate service provider. So anything from setting up your company to visas to taxation, accounting, insurance, golden visas, bank account openings, all you can think of. And the whole idea is when you're starting a business, you don't have the money to invest in people. Like you don't have money to invest into an accountant, a marketing person, an HR person, all that. So we do all these services. You pay a small fee and we do all these services for you as support until you're big enough to actually hire your own people to do these things, especially with the latest introduction of taxes, corporate taxes, VAT, all these things. You know, if you're starting a business, most of the time you don't have the money to do.
So you're a one-stop shop.
We're our one-stop shop now, yeah.
Right. So stepping back, you left ITP April, March
So I left
2018.
ITP in April 2018. I joined Virtuzone with the guys as CEO with equity because that was part of the deal.
And what made you finally decide to get out of media?
Oh, look, if we get into my career, I have a very uncommon career path. So I'm an engineer by education, studied in Montreal, as you know. And I started my career in telecoms with a company called Harris Microwave Communications, which is basically an American company, doing what it says, microwave communications, so boring technology stuff, wireless technology stuff. And I started as a quality and continuous improvement engineer, whatever, right? 2 years of that was great, was stepping into the corporate world. I actually started in my last year of university. They took me on as an intern and then hired me for the first couple of years. Great experience. It was a great place to start because it was a huge company, right? Over 10,000 or 13,000 employees, so very well set.
Based in Montreal?
Well, one office was in Montreal.
And that's where
when
you
I was
were.
working. Yeah, but we had offices in Montreal, in Florida, in Redwood Shores, California, in Melbourne, Florida, North Carolina, a few places. And then, so technical engineering wasn't for me. I always knew that, but I needed a job. It was the first job. It was a great opportunity that I got. Then a friend of mine that was with me at university used to work for a company called Savaria. So Savaria used to do mobility equipment, so wheelchair lifts, stair lifts, all these things. And Savaria's founder, who's now one of the 10 richest people in Quebec, Marcel Bourassa, had bought the company for about $200,000 and decided to take it public. Did a great job at it, and he was looking for salespeople, but he wanted salespeople that were engineers that would understand the product, because basically he was manufacturing in Montreal and sending to all these dealers in the US. That's where the money is. When you're manufacturing in Canada, the US, well, current affairs, but I mean the US is your biggest market. And we had a network of about 300-400 dealers in the US, and he wanted engineers that could speak English and that would understand the product and that were good salespeople. And I'll never forget when I went to see him, and he interviewed me. He said, George, and his English was a bit broken, the typical Quebecer. And he's like, George, I want people who put the puck in the net. You put the puck in the net. You're hired. And it was honestly 3 of the best years of my life work-wise. We were young. I was young. I was working with friends. He had bought, the company had bought 300. You remember the Honda Element when it first came out? This big, ugly box. And you just put us in the cars and go down to the US and, meet with the dealers, take them out for lunch, get the sales going. And we did very well. The company grew very fast. Now, here's how I got to Dubai. And I'm sorry, I'm just recapping because that's, because you're asking me why did I switch to media, and you'll understand that I've switched to much crazier things before that. So, my dad's in Africa. He's a contractor in Africa. He's in Sierra Leone, out of all places, when things were going off in Sierra Leone. And he comes to see a supplier here in Dubai. And he calls me up and he says, George, I know you always wanted to do your own thing. I'm in Dubai. Dubai reminds me of
This is what year?
This is 2004 or 2003. And he says, Dubai reminds me of Saudi in the 70s. And my dad made a lot of money in Saudi in the 70s as a contractor. He's like, you always wanted to do your own thing. If you want to come here, come, I'll help you out. Start something here. This is a great place to start. So I'm torn because I'm loving this job that I'm in. I love Marcel. So I go to see Marcel. I said, look, Marcel, I'm torn here, but I really want to make this move. I'm going to go to Dubai. It's something that I always wanted to do, to start my own business. My father's there. It's a land of opportunity. He says, okay, we're going to go together. He says, you're going to go open an office for us there and we'll go 50-50 and I'll finance it. I said, can't get a better deal than that for a soft landing in Dubai, right? Gives me $500,000 and says, go open the office, pay yourself a salary, and Dubai's, mobility equipment, accessibility, all that. Dubai at the time, the construction was crazy. He's like, look, it's got to be a great market for us, and that's how it started. Meanwhile, my dad decided to open his own contracting company here as well. So a couple of years after, he's like, look, are you going to keep, you're going to keep running this small company of yours, or do you want to come run the family business and make this company, a division of the family business? It made sense. I didn't want to get into contracting. I hate contracting, but it made sense for me to do that. Got into it, and we grew the business to about 450 employees, turnover of just over $140 million in, I would say, 6 years, until 2008, Lehman, the crash. We had 6 projects. 5 of the 6 projects stopped overnight. And in contracting, if your project stopped, you're cooked. You finance the jobs in contracting. Basically, you buy material, you build, and then you invoice, and then they pay you for the work that you've done. Stops overnight. I go from 440 employees, I remember, to 160 in 2 weeks, because all these employees, don't forget, you're paying for their labor accommodation, you're paying for their buses to take them back and forth, you're paying their salaries, you're paying all that. And if you're not getting any income, you're simply cooked. You can't survive. Go down to 160 employees, then down to 60. Then I spent 2 years after Lehman. We had 1 project still running, and I spent 2 years just running after money, running after people who owed us money, the clients who owed us money, trying to, stave off our suppliers. Yeah, just wait for me. I'm just waiting to get paid to pay you, and so on and so forth. And after I was done, and we had survived, and we kept our head out of the water, and we didn't owe anybody money, and we didn't lose any money. Basically, we broke even. I told my dad, look, I've done my time for the family. I know it's always been your dream for me to, for me and my brother to run this contracting business. It's not for me. I don't like it. I don't like getting out of bed in the morning. I hate it. And oddly enough, he said, you know what? You're right. I see it, and you have done your time. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. Just move on. And that's when I met a friend who was managing director at ITP, if you remember. And we were just sitting out in the pool in Jumeirah Beach Hotel. And he's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm in contracting, but I really want to get out of it." And and he says, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay." He says, "What do you do these days?" I said, "I spend my days doing almost nothing. I just go see my clients, try to get my money." He says, "Look, I'd love to have a chat, like more of a chat. Why don't you come to the office on Saturday?" At the time, we still used to work on Saturdays, I think, yeah, or Sunday, whatever it was. I get to ITP on a Sunday. I had nothing to do. I get there. I said, I'll go have a coffee with this guy. Why not? He's a nice guy. We'll have a chat. Having a coffee, and I get to. I didn't know anything about media. I didn't know media. First of all, I didn't know media was this big. I didn't know media pays well sometimes. I didn't know.
Sometimes.
Well, commercial media does pay well, right? On the editorial side, I agree with you. It's not very well paid, which I always found, by the way, a bit unfair.
But I think that's where the companies usually made their money.
Well, commercial are paid more in general in any company, even at Virtuzone. The commercial guys, the guys that are, but they work hard for their money.
Right.
They're paid on what they bring in, basically. But that's the old adage of that's how it is. Anyway, so
you go have a coffee.
I go have a coffee. I get into this place, beautiful lobby, beautiful building. I mean, you
This is
remember
the new building?
Yeah,
Yep.
you remember the building. It was a beautiful place. Very
Must have just opened up then too.
must have been 2 or 3, 4 months, whatever, something like that. Beautiful place. Yes, I'm here to see so-and-so. Yes, he'll be with you in a minute. Come down, 3-piece suit. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, this is not the guy I saw in the pool. What's the story?
Sure.
Get up into his office. His office is 500 square feet, sofa, this, that. And we start talking, and he's like, look, our director of our technology titles just left and went back to South Africa. So, we're looking for somebody to replace her. So I'm not thinking me. Like, they can't possibly be asking me. What do I have nothing to do with me? So I'm like, I'll think of somebody. I'll see if I know some. He's like, no, I'm asking you. Would it be something that interests you? And I look at him. I said, look, I don't know anything about media. And he says, look, it's not rocket science. And he tells me in Arabic, I'll never forget it, media is the job for those who don't have a job. He says it to me in Arabic like that. I'm like, okay, well, that's not very encouraging. That's not a very good way
especially coming from somebody who's the boss.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not very good. That's not good way to motivate me. But anyway, so he's like, what would it take to have you on board? I'm like, but again, I don't know anything about me. He says, look, you learn on the job. You're a sales guy. You know half the city. You're a very good communicator. I'm not worried. You're gonna pick this up very quickly. So how much do you want? And I'm like, I've been with a family business for 6-7 years. I've never thought of working outside or what my salary would be outside or something like that. So I just think of a number that I think I would be happy to work with, and I say, this. And he says, okay, let's do it. And I'm like, shit, I came here for a coffee. Now I've got this job offer, which I really like, to be honest with you, because it's something completely different. What am I going to tell my dad? How am I going to go back and tell my dad, I'm leaving the family business? Anyway, I go back, I massage it in and say, look, it's time for me for a change, this and that. I'm not going to have many opportunities to get back into the corporate world. And I told you already, I'm sick of what I'm doing, and this is something I really like to try. And that's how I got into ITP, and I stayed at ITP for 7 years. I loved it, to be honest with you. I really loved that job. We met so many people. I mean, you're used to it because in this business you meet so many people. But for me, it was eye-opening, especially after 4 or 5 years of contracting, man. Where
same people all the time.
Same people on site, dirty business. It's a tough business. Contracting is a really, really tough business. For those of you listening, you really have to have a passion for contracting to be able to endure many years.
Okay, so jump ahead. You've done your time at ITP, and what was it that made you see? Was it the friendship with the founders at Virtuzone, or was it?
No, same as always, MJP.
Something
same
different.
as always. 6-7 years of ITP. I was doing the same thing. I have met a lot of people, but I was doing the
those
same thing.
Those Friday rushes when you were trying to make sure that
that we hit those targets and getting in the money. But I've never been afraid of that. I always loved that. That's actually what drives me. I like these
deadline.
Yeah, the deadline, the pressure.
That's the same thing for me, and it's certainly going into newspapers where I like that daily rush.
Yeah,
right. Where magazines were a little bit different at
exactly.
ITP, but for the newspapers,
we're flexible with the closing,
yes.
the closing times.
Yes.
So I wasn't fed up. I wouldn't say I was fed up, but I was ready for a new challenge. This was a new industry. It was a CEO role. It was obviously equity as part of the deal. 2 friends. They were looking for somebody who's Arabic. Obviously, with Virtuzone, there's a lot of government relations, stuff like that. So I really had something to contribute there. The guys had been after me for 2-3 years before, but we couldn't make it work because they were still in a nascent or growing phase, and I was very well off at ITP. But the time came, and I remember, we were at Cove Beach for my girlfriend, who's now my wife's birthday, and the guys call me up, Jeff, and they say, "Hey, buddy, where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm at Cove Beach," and they're like, I'm like, they're acting weird on the phone. I'm like, "Why don't you guys come come join for a drink?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." So they come, as they usually would, right? I mean, there was nothing off about it. But then I realized the guys are a bit off. They're both staring at me in a bit of a weird way, and they're not getting into it. And it's Geraldine's birthday, and and all of a sudden Neil says to me, he says, "George, can we talk for a minute on the side?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "We go to a side table." He goes, "Look, we've been talking about it for many years now. We'd really like you to join us, and the time has come because of some circumstances that we need you to join us sooner rather than later. So what's it going to take?" I said, "Look, guys, we've talked about this many times already. I've told you I'm very good where I am, and I told you the conditions that I'm in. It's going to take something better than that for me to move." Same thing. They said, "Okay, done. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to pay you. This is what we're going to give you in equity. Does this work for you?" The next day, I resigned from ITP. I had a 3-month notice. They asked me to not work the 3 months in typical fashion, and a month later I was at Virtuzone.
So they would have paid you for those 3 months?
Yeah.
So you did that, what everybody dreams of. You did the double dipping, where you...
I did the double dipping. Well, didn't really dream of it. I would have
Oh,
preferred
no,
to,
I think when they switch jobs, most people... How can I get paid by two people for an extended period
I didn't
of time?
think of it that way. I would have preferred to take some time off, actually. But there was an urgency at Virtuzone because the other guy had left, and there was an urgency to actually start right away. And that's what I did. I mean, I hit the ground running, and we did very well in the first 6 months.
So when you joined, did you have a strategy, or is it you just wanted to get to be a certain size? Or were there issues that you needed to sort out before you could figure out a way for it to grow?
It's interesting you say that, right? I always had the feeling that the 5 years I spent in the family business running a construction firm were a waste of time.
Until
I started this job, and I think that 80% of what I applied in this job, I had learned it in the family business rather than at IITP.
And was it because you needed to organize things and you knew how to do that? Or was it...
Yeah, because there's fundamentals. When you're running a business, there are fundamentals that you need to know. First of all, there are some financial fundamentals you need to understand. A lot of people don't know that or don't have that.
And you understand that?
And I understand it fully. I can read a P&L. I can read financial statements. I understand them very well. I'm actually good with numbers. Maybe being an engineer helps, but I'm good with numbers. There are certain managerial structures that you need to understand. There are certain cost elements that you need to be able to manage. And listen, the most important thing in any business that I've learned in the family business, by far the biggest challenge to any business manager or business leader is cash flow management. By far, you could be brilliant at the subject. You can be brilliant in that industry. You could be a brilliant salesman. You could be a brilliant technician. You could be whatever you want. If you don't know how to manage your cash flow, you're doomed from the start. This is by far the biggest challenge that
So at ITP, where you would have been closing your targets every week, you would have recognized, okay, we got to start getting money in. And is that one of the things that you needed to do when you joined Virtuzone?
ITP, I didn't have to worry about cash flow. I only had to worry about the revenue side.
Okay.
I did not have to worry about the cost side, right? In the construction business, you become a master at cash flow management. Again, because what I told you, you finance the project and then you get paid. If you make mistakes in the financing or in what you're getting paid on your projections or your cash flow projections, you're cooked. You're going to get to a point where you don't have a penny to be able to pay salaries, right? And that's what I learned the best on the job in the contract.
And is that what the guys who brought you in at Virtuzone wanted you to do? Is that they were struggling with some of or had the company gotten too big for them at that point?
I think it's a bit of both. I think also the guys brought me in to grow the business because every business founder wants to grow the business to a point of exit, which we'll talk about that later. We exited in December this year. But it was growth of the business, obviously. The most important thing, which also people don't realize, and we can talk about that a bit later, it's very important to grow your business year on year. A healthy business must grow year on year, unless, of course, there's a black swan event like we had with COVID or whatever. But a healthy business must absolutely grow year after year after year after year. There's none of that. We've had a good year. We've had a bad year.
We're going to sit back and wait.
A bad year is a year where you've had less growth than the year before. It's not a year where you didn't have any growth.
So are you projecting growth, or are you just trying to achieve any growth?
No, you project growth. So I sit every year at the end of towards the fourth quarter, and you say, okay, this is what we did last year. This is what I believe we can do this year. These are the initiatives that we're going to take to actually bring this extra revenue to, and it's not, we're going to work harder or, we're going to sell more. Or,
My last boss, that's exactly, we're going to work harder.
No. The work factor is obviously something,
sure.
but I take it for granted that everybody's always working hard, right? And that's my culture in the company as well. Anyway, but no, what are the new initiatives that we're going to bring in? What are the new revenue streams we're going to bring in? What new services are we going to offer? What new markets are we going to get into? Saudi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't sit there. Look, people are human, right? And especially today, the new generation is... I'm going to sound old. You're going to sound old, but it's...
I'm not going to sound old. You're saying this, not me.
Well, you're older than me, so you want to go down that road. They're different. They want to work as little as possible. They want to make as much money as possible. And they want as much work-life balance as possible.
Do you think... Because my kids are 28, as I was telling you.
That's the new generation that I'm talking about.
I understand. But do you think it's a lack of a work ethic, or do you think that they just expect more from society or / their employer?
It's a good question. Look, I think in our kids' case, I think they were brought up in in an easier environment, I would say. I mean, we've provided them, I think, with a comfortable, at the very least, lifestyle. You know, good education, good housing, good holidays, clothing, all these things. No, I think it's a cultural thing. Look, I think it's a cultural thing. I think people make money easier today as well. In our time, it's you work and you get paid an hour, whatever it was when we were students. Today, they get on YouTube and they get on TikTok.
But
and
everything is so expensive nowadays as well.
That's also the other thing, right? So I'm like, and I don't understand, I'm not going to say this, but I don't understand how some people get by, to be honest with you.
No, I agree with that.
I don't understand how some people get by, but yet they don't have this hunger to make more. They have a hunger to travel more, or to be free, or to work from home a couple of times a year.
Well, I think that's I think that's social media, and I think like you go on your phone and you see somebody around the world doing that, and you go, I want to do that.
But MJP, let's face it. Before COVID, there was no such thing as work from home, or very little of it.
Yes, this is true.
Very little of it.
So, are you against work from home?
I'm not a big fan.
Why? Because you brought up something really interesting, which I agree with as well. The same attitude, which is you go into a relationship trusting somebody, right? And so you're going to assume the best until you prove me wrong. I'm going to assume that you're doing the work. My attitude is that if you're a good manager, then people get assigned tasks, and then they have a certain responsibility to make sure that that job is done properly. If they're doing that within my eyesight or not, my attitude is, why do I care? And because I think for a lot of companies, maybe not all companies, but a lot of companies saw during COVID, oh, this can work. So
we did it as well.
And
we did it as well, and it was, to be honest with you, it was quite successful.
Right.
But you had an environment of pressure, of survival, an environment of, we all want to keep our jobs, an environment of, we all need to stay afloat here. So there was, whether you like it, I wouldn't say trust, there was a certain, how would I say it, desperation.
Yeah, we were all desperate.
Desperation to stay afloat, and desperation to work.
Because we would see, like the airline industry, we saw a lot of people losing their jobs.
And I guarantee you, COVID, for you and I, will forever be one of the most intense work experience we've had in our lives, right? To me, it is, for sure. To me, that the COVID times, and I was CEO of Virtugroup at the time, cut salaries by 50%, the whole thing, we had to react very quickly, the lockdown, working from home, working the phones, putting in systems. I mean, it shows you why the human race is still undefeated.
Right.
Right? It shows you that. Right? And I always said it every time people were scared. I said, look, we remain undefeated till today, and there's a reason for it.
Okay, so why the hesitancy to sort of be a fan of working from home now?
Because you can trust people. I don't think that everybody will be honest in their work.
But don't you think that that's true if you were to...
And it's not in a spirit of, oh, I'm paying you and you're not working.
Right.
It's in a spirit of, I need to get the work done.
Okay, but
right?
But if you're walking around the office and like you might be able to identify who's working and who's not.
Yes, but there's an environment in the office that pushes you to work. There's this sort of phenomenon of crowd that's like, look, the guy next to me is working, so I need to be working, even if I'm flirting a bit with my phone or whatever it is. But I got to get back to my desk. I got to get some work done. Nothing stops you at work, at home, to just do nothing for the whole day and just maybe work for a couple hours, send a couple of emails, and
so
the productivity must go down.
So, maybe,
in my opinion,
and I understand, but I wonder maybe if it's because we're different industries, right? So
you can write from anywhere.
Exactly.
Because you have to provide the article. You have to provide the article.
Right. You either did the work or you didn't.
Exactly. Yes. I have people selling. I have people client facing.
So they might.
I have people that are servicing clients all the time. I have people that are dealing with government, right? You can. How do I know that you're calling all your leads from home, right? Oh, I received 15 leads that they're all no good.
So I understand what you're saying.
So unless you have the technology, right, and it's got to be really good technology to be able to, and that's expensive, by the way, and time consuming to implement. Unless you have the technology to really track what's going on. But then, in a commercial environment, it's very difficult for people to work from home.
So I haven't worked in a commercial environment, so I can't say. But I would think that if somebody is productive when they're in the office, then they should be productive when they're not in the office.
They will be on the first day, maybe the second day. Third day, they're like, you know what, this is pretty cool.
So is this maybe this is a salesperson sort of issue rather than a global issue?
I am a I admit it, I am a commercially minded leader, right? And to me,
targets and numbers matter.
Are the most important, not only matter, are the most important. Targets, numbers, and client satisfaction or customer service are, to me, what's most important.
Okay, so we talked about the younger generation, and one of the things that I think we've learned, one of the things I've learned from my kids, social media as well as from my kids, is the need to have these conversations about mental health.
That's a very good point.
Where do you fall on that? Because I would imagine a lot of your colleagues are sort of very aware of their mental health.
Look, I'm not ashamed to say it. In the last, I joined 7 years ago. We've lost about 10 people for mental health issues. I'm very aware of it. I completely agree with it. I think it's actually a real issue. And I don't think it's a new issue.
No.
I think that we talk about it now,
yes.
right? We talk about it. So I think mental health has always been an issue. It was a bit of a taboo subject before. Somewhere, somewhat, in the last 10 years, we started talking about it. But I also think another thing. I think it's being abused as a subject.
So you think certain people are taking advantage
I'm tired,
of...
I got mental health issues, right? I don't feel like coming to work today, I have mental health issues, I'm depressed. No, we all have days where we don't feel like coming to work. We all have days where we're tired. We all have days
This
where...
is an issue that I struggle with sometimes as a manager, which is... how far do you push when someone... I had one colleague who would talk about the worst things that he could do when it comes to his mental health. And as a human, you care.
Yeah.
And you're conscious of the need for you to step in and do something. And yet it became like a broken record. And it might 100% have been the case. But at what point am I, as a manager, comfortable saying, halas, that's it. You know what? You're either in or you're out.
Look, I'm a bit... It's a balancing act, and it's a difficult balancing act.
Sure.
You have to be, as a manager, if you're running a business, you have to be somewhat... flexible, somewhat understanding. And that's what I always say. I'm a psychologist more than I am anything else, because I deal with people's,
Right.
Horses for courses. People's different. People are all different. You talk to them. All my senior management's different. I talk to them in different ways. I know the levels of grief I can give them, and the level of tone I can raise my voice, and they know that. We talk about it, right?
Sure.
They know that. And on the other hand, you have to be ruthless somewhere, because I've learned that, and it's unfortunate. Maybe it's human nature. I don't know, but people will take advantage of your
Right.
kindness. People will take advantage of your kindness. But in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I can tell you, and you know me, right? I'm a bit old school in that way, whereas sink or swim, no, none of that. None of that softy stuff.
You're not
right?
going to hold your hand.
Softy stuff or whatever. But in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I have become sensitive to mental health issues. I understand it. I read a lot about it. I've gone through some of it myself, right? Which again is normal. That's something that's always happened. We just talk about it more. And I try to be as accommodating as possible. In some cases, people need help. People need professional help, and people need, they're clinically depressed or clinically whatever it is,
right.
and they need help. We try to push them to seek help. We try, in terms of within the company, we have a social team that tries to keep people's how can I say this? Their moods up, stuff like that. We have also a company that comes in once a quarter and that does these workshops about mental health and all these things, which I think is important. But at the end of the day, to me, it's like, look, you come to see me saying that you have a mental health issue, it's a serious thing, right? You've worked up the guts to come talk to me. That means that it's really bothering you. Sure. You need to talk about it. We talk about it. I try to share my experiences with them because, in general, we are older than our employees. We've been through a lot in life.
And sometimes people just need to talk.
And sometimes people just need to talk. And I have an open door policy in the office. I try to help, try to give you some guidance on what you should be doing. come to me a second time and you say, look, it's not working, or your manager will come up to me and say, look, it's not working, this and that. I say, well, look, maybe it's time that this person goes and sees somebody who's a professional. I'm not a professional, but, and if it still doesn't work out, then it's if it's affecting your work, I'm sorry, but it's affecting your work, and maybe you need to go focus on yourself rather than on work. And
I've had those conversations, not about mental health, but certainly with colleagues, people who report to me, where they'll say, I'm going through, some issues. And I would have a conversation with them as a colleague, not as a boss. And more than once, I would say to somebody, maybe you're no longer interested in this. Maybe you need to be thinking about, like, what's the next step in your journey? Mm-hmm. Is it because we live overseas? Is it going back home? Is it going back to school? Is it maybe you need a vacation? How much time do you have on your vacation? Why don't you take a couple of weeks? Don't make any decision now and come back afterwards. And more often than not, it's that chance for people to voice their concerns, for someone to validate that they're going through something, and then they take that break and they come back and they resign, or they come back and they're focused again. But I think sometimes it is one of the, as I said earlier, it's one of the conversations I think that social media has helped allow us to have, because social media will there'll be conversations there about mental health, and I think that will inspire people to go to their managers.
There's also different levels of pressure, right? I mean, there are some jobs that are more high pressure, some jobs that are less pressure, some companies that are more high pressure, some companies that are less pressure. If you choose to be an editor with deadline, a newspaper editor with deadline every day, I'm sorry, you're choosing to be in a high pressure environment. Might not be for you, right? But you should know that after a couple of years. It's not after 13 years that you say, well, I can't deal with the pressure, right? Unless you have one particularly difficult boss or whatever it is. If you're in sales and you have targets, and for the last 10 years you've had targets, this isn't news. This isn't new. Oh, well, the targets are too high. Well, I'm sorry, the targets are not too high because others are achieving them. Right. So mental health becomes an excuse. And I agree with you where you say, maybe this is not for you. Maybe this place is not for you. Maybe this job's not for you. Maybe you're meant to go into more of a secretarial job or an administrative job or something like that. Or maybe you're meant to go to a company where the sales targets are yearly rather than monthly, or rather than weekly, or rather than whatever it is. Sure. And you have to juggle all this. You have to read and react. Again, I'm telling you, I could probably be given a degree in psychology by now for all the different characters that I've met, and you too, all the different characters that I've met, all the different people that I've met, all the different reactive types that we've met, and I love it. I like dealing with that, and I think I'm pretty good at it, to be honest, because you can't succeed in this job if you're not good at that. But the fact of the matter is, mental health is an issue. It's always been an issue. I don't think it's more now than before. Perhaps it is because of social media. I think we have a real problem with social media. I'm really worried about my kids. I'm really worried about my kids because everybody's life is amazing on social media, and you're always looking and saying, well, I'm a loser, right? I'm not on these holidays. I don't have this car. I don't have this watch. Sure. I'm guilty with the watches because I collect watches. But social media is making people unhappy, man. And it's a real problem. And
you said something earlier that I want to touch upon again, which is that you have an ability, and I have a theory about this, not just about you, but about a certain type of leader, where you recognize that person needs to be taken out for coffee. That person needs their hand held. That person maybe needs a conversation where I'm going to swear a little bit. And I'm going to exercise my frustration with them. And this is where I have the theory. And I'm not going to say what it is because I want to hear what you have to say. How do you think you came to that point where you recognized how... So I read Phil Jackson's book, 11 Rings, coach of the Lakers, coach of the Bulls. And he said, I don't treat everyone the same, but I treat everyone fairly, which means the way that you and I interact, if you're my boss, is going to be different than the way our technician here, Abdullah.
But I would say exactly the same thing as Phil Jackson.
So where do you think you picked that up? Because
Trial and error.
Okay.
So a lot of trial and error.
I would say this because you and I used to play hockey together.
Yeah.
And I think it's the dressing room. And I think you recognize that...
Different characters, different...
The star needs to be treated differently than the goaltender.
Yeah.
Who needs to be treated differently than the fourth line guy, differently than the second line winger. And I think that ability to recognize
So I have a real answer for you if you're taking it from that angle.
Okay, tell me.
I'm an immigrant. I came to Canada when I was 7 years old. I came to Canada, I spoke a bit of English, a bit of French, mostly Arabic. I was put in school 2 days later with white kids, Canadian kids, all that.
In Quebec?
In Quebec. I had to learn to integrate very quickly, right? And if I wasn't going to be the loser who was going to get bullied at school, and I have a big ego, if I wasn't going to be the loser that was going to get bullied at school, I had to learn very quickly how to integrate and how to be like them. And in order to be like them, you have to study their characters one by one and understand how to please them.
And how to interact with each person.
And how to interact with each person differently. So I think that's where it stems from to start with. I like the analogy of the dressing room. I grew up playing hockey as well, as you know. I like the analogy of the dressing room, but I think my integration as an immigrant, and I'd love to write one day a book about that, actually, believe it or not. I've always thought about that, has given me those skills, those street smart skills, if you want, to be able to read and react to people and read right through people. I'm very good, and I still think I'm very good, and my friends tell me that, at reading characters. I have a very good hunch about people after a minute talking to them. He's a good guy, he's a bad guy, he's a liar, he's a good kid, he's a crook.
I agree with you.
He's a crook, he's smart, he's funny, he's not,
he wants something. Instincts are really helpful.
Correct. But you build those instincts very young, right?
Yes.
And these were instincts of, if you want, the sink or swim instincts that I had when I first came to Canada, of either being marginalized as an immigrant kid, or being part of the group, which I wanted to be because I wanted to be cool and I wanted to be all that. So, but I've made mistakes. That being said, I've treated people in a way that's bothered them at work. Well, that wasn't really well phrased. I misread people, if you want, at work, thinking that I could take it up to that level with someone, or I clearly couldn't, because that kind of crushed them. I've been too kind to people where I could have been a bit more, stiff and firm with them. But that doesn't happen often. I think I'm pretty good at it.
Do you have... Personal regrets are a strong word, but I have professional regrets where I handled, and it's rarely about the work. I regret some of the interactions I had with people that I worked with. Do you have any of those?
I do. I can think of 2 or 3 of them. But when you're a leader, MJP, what matters, I'm sorry to say this, and it sounds a bit cruel, and it sounds a bit very capitalist, or whatever you want to call it. What matters is the bottom line. Anything you do, and I've learned that comes with experience, with age. I don't really care about the personal anymore. I'm not going to argue with you or punish you or mistreat you because I have a personal problem with you. We're all there to do a job, and we're all there to contribute to the bottom line. And honestly, look, I'd be lying, and any leader would be lying if I told you I like everybody at work equally, or I love them all, right? There are some people I don't really like. There are some people I don't really like to deal with. There are some people that get on my nerves. But it doesn't matter, because we're all part of one machine that's supposed to contribute to the bottom line.
And that's where sorry to interrupt you. That's where I think, for me, the sports analogy works, because you're going to play on a team.
You don't like everyone.
Exactly.
You don't like everyone.
But you've got a common goal.
I agree with you, and that's something that we've definitely learned through team sports. So yeah, do I have a few regrets of how I reacted or how I treated some people that have left me? Maybe sometimes. Yes, I do. But you know what? I believe I'm a bit of call it an arrogant thinker, and I think that was the right decision at the time to do. Do I regret that we parted ways because of it? Yes, I do. But I don't regret that I got where I wanted to get professionally and where I wanted to get in terms of financials on that year or whatever it is. You have to be selfish.
So, a question that I sometimes ask people, which is, one of the best social media posts I made was when I was quite honest about how we had done something wrong at Collegiate Times. So, what do you have a biggest fail for you? Something where you look back and you go, I really dropped the ball there. And maybe you learned from it, maybe you didn't, but you look back on something and you go, that was not a good move. Because I think when people share that big fail, they're vulnerable, and I think it allows others to relate because we've all messed up, right?
It's a good question. I'd love to say that there's one that pops to mind, but here's the thing, right? So I'm an engineer by education. I'm very analytical. You know me well, and you know that I could be a very spontaneous or very reactive person, which is true. That is part of my personality. I'm very spontaneous or reactive. But oddly, when it comes to big decisions, I'm very analytical. I look at it left, right, up, down from every angle before I make a major decision. I cannot honestly think in the last 7 years, for example, of any decision that I've made that I truly regret or think that there are some decisions that could have been handled better, maybe we could have tweaked it here or there. But to say that one decision was a black or white, I chose black, and it should have actually been white, I can't think of any of them. Now, I always tell people in a day, I have to take between, I would say, 10 and 20 decisions every day. Every day I must make as CEO between 10 and 20 decisions, from the smallest one to a direction-changing decision. Not every day, obviously, but I get 10 to 20 decisions. If I can get 90% of them right, I think I'm doing a good job.
Okay.
That's my gauge.
So with that in mind, my last question: what's next for you, Virtuzone?
So, we sold the company in December, as you know, or as you might have heard. We sold it to a group from Singapore called Essentium, backed by a private equity from Hong Kong called Hill House Capital. And so we are now. So I, as a CEO, and both partners had to roll over some of our proceeds into the new business. So we're actually shareholders in the global entity. So we're now actually a global entity, and we're shareholders in a global entity which spans all the way from Japan to the Caribbean. So part of the group are Links, which are payroll solutions, Harney's Fiduciary, which is basically offshore licensing, Cayman Islands, BVI, all that, Incorp Singapore, Incorp China. There's another company that we're working on in Japan, another company. I mean, we're working on a few. One in Saudi. We're working on a few companies. So we've become a global company, and our aim is obviously to become the biggest corporate service provider in the world. But look at the timing, right? The world's becoming depolarized. People are going to need to move around. Manufacturing is going to have to move around a bit, and this is the perfect timing for us because now we're offering this setup service across the globe. And I think these people had vision when they started doing this, and they started creating this global company. We just had a call last week actually saying, guys, you shouldn't be worried about this. This is actually why we've created this. This is actually very good. They're very good for us. So I think another 3-4 years of growth of this global company by acquiring new companies and by organic growth. And I think hopefully 4 or 5 years down the line, a bigger exit, and then you and I can go off and play some hockey and maybe enjoy some of the beaches in St. Petersburg.
George, thank you so much for joining me.
MJP, it was great to see you again. Thank you so much for the time, and I really appreciate it. And best of luck with the podcast. I really love it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.